Welcome to the LaunchFamily Podcast, where we make sense of modern parenting one real conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jessica Shelley, a mom of six and former educator, helping parents cut through the noise and find what actually works for their home. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Tawana Wiggins. Tawana is an educator, coach, speaker, and mom who wears many hats, including that of a proud ADHD parent. With more than 20 years in education, leadership, and counseling, Tawana now focuses on supporting moms and families navigating the real daily realities of raising neurodivergent children. She's the host of Tawana Talks podcast and an advocate for building strong, emotionally connected families. Tawana's mission is not just about offering another parenting strategy, it's about nurturing the woman behind the title of mom and bringing real, raw, empowering support to families raising kids with ADHD. Tawana, welcome to the show.
Oh my God, that was an awesome introduction. I'm like, who's that lady? I want to know her. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining. I want to, give our listeners a little bit of context for who you are. So can we start off with just sharing a little bit more about your background and how your parenting journey brought you into the work that you do today?
Oh my God, yes. So as you mentioned, I've been in education now for a little over 20 years, but I've been a mom for almost 30 years. And I approached education by accident. Like I worked in corporate for a while. And when we moved to the South, I started to do like substitute teaching so that I could be at the same schedule of my children. But then I also was getting my degree in business so that I can help my husband at the time in his business. And so it felt by accident. So I thought, but it was definitely divine. And so I started as a substitute teacher, and then I moved all the way through the ranks and came up to be a COO in education. Who would have ever thought, right? But my approach to education, whether it was teaching in the classroom, whether it was principal a school or leading an organization for the school, the approach was always the same way as how I parented my children. It wasn't until several years later when my daughter, who's 10 now, was 8, was diagnosed with ADHD. And I thought that I can use all of my strategies and tools that I learned in school and that I practiced in the classroom and I practiced in leadership and advocated and all of those things to do what it was that she needed to do and be successful. But life wasn't stopping for her. Life was still going. As I was trying to figure it out, she was struggling bad, and so was I. And it was becoming a deep, deep stab in our relationship, in my leadership, and all of the things. And so I had to do what I had to do. I had to get her tested and then diagnosed. And I didn't want to get her labeled because I didn't know much about ADHD, and I also didn't agree with the label. And I was like, no, I can do all of the things. But I did because I knew that that title, or not necessarily the title, but that was what's going to be the greatest advocacy for her. It was going to push the education system to do what it was needed, not just my words and my leadership. But aside from that, those technical and those very, very strategic and scriptural type things, when I say scriptural, prescriptural, I mean like prescription type things, it was, I start to understand and see like how the journey that God had took me through from day one of having children of my life to where I was on how he was preparing me for something greater. And so I learned a lot about me through parenting her. I often say that my older two children, they made me mom. Everyone would say, you should write a book. And I'm like, oh my God, I wish I'd wrote that book because I need it now for this child. And, but as I sat and I looked and I said, they made me, she shows me who I am every day as I started being more intentional about who she is as a person, how she identifies the world, how she sees things, and how she interprets, it started to show me more about me and how I needed to be really intentional and slowing down. And the smallest of things that she would do or how she would respond to me and our engagement showed me a lot about my leadership and where I needed to make shifts and adjustments and changes, not just for her, but for me as an overall human. And so that's how it brought me to recognizing how do we identify what God has gave us, to pull out the tools that he has also given us. Like he's given me my child. This is the one thing, the three things, children, I shouldn't say things, that I did not go to school for. I did not get awarded for. I did not get promoted for. I was called for. And so therefore I have the twos that are there. And so that's really just how that came about. And so fleshing that out more into not just moms of neurodivergent children, but also women leaders and what that looks like when you're called to something. How do you navigate the internal being so that you can pull out those tools to do operate in that calling well, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And, and I think another question too that kind of comes from what you just mentioned is this transformation that had to happen within you as you received your daughter's diagnosis, and then you later discovered that your older two children were also neurodivergent. So as you kind of found yourself in this place of navigating, neurodivergent parenting, ADHD parenting, what were some of the biggest misconceptions that you've come across in that journey?
Yeah, yeah. One of the biggest things I would say is you don't realize you think that it's just, your child's issue, quote unquote. And so you're just like, okay, we just have to do all the things for the child. You don't realize how it's emotionally taxing and also rewarding when you realize how to navigate it for those who are caregiving. In my case, being the parent, then you also start to see how all of the stigmas like, oh, you're not disciplining well, or you should do this or you should do that, and you're like, you give me all these shoulds, but I bet you're not, asking to babysit. Like, so that you can, implement some of these shoulds that you're giving me. And so the biggest misconception as well was also this is not a hyperactiveness of the body. It is also of the mind. Because even when I was in education, I thought it was just the moving. All of them were like, you just have to, and I even was told my daughter was little, I need to train her to sit still. At the time, I was like, okay, so we have to build some stamina for sitting still. But now that I've been through, I'm like, you can't train a person for something that their brain is literally telling them to do. Like they have no control, but it's not only the body. Like my son is 25 years old and he was diagnosed at 23. And now in hindsight, when I look back, and he was AIG everything and excelled in everything, but he had hyperactivity of the mind. He was always thinking he should have been ahead more than what they were providing him. So he always overstudied or over looked into things and was like, I want to know this now. And his teachers would say things like, oh, you'll learn that when you're in ninth grade. He goes, no, because when I'm in ninth grade, I probably want to know college. Like, and he would get such so anxious. Like every year he would get canker sores because he would be so worried that what if I don't know what they're teaching me? And I would have to say, you're not supposed to. Like that's why you're going to school. And so, and then my daughter also with the hyperactivity of the mind, she doesn't sleep well because she may be sleeping, but she's not resting because her brain is on constant go. So when she goes to school, if you're not stimulating her in a way that keeps her brain downloading that dopamine that she's so yearning for, gonna go to sleep. And you could be thinking you're doing something so fun, and it's like, no, it's not giving me what I need, and I'm already sleepy because I didn't sleep well at night. So those are some of the really big misconceptions that I had that I try to educate not just moms who are in it with me, but also just, the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned too, like your background as an educator, right? You had strategies that you could have employed with your children. But then to your point too, it's like you can't, no matter how much behavior reinforcement you do, sometimes things will still not work. And, as we
Yeah.
see, and I'm a mom, I have six children myself. And it's like, as we kind of apply these strategies, right? To our own lives, to our own children, sometimes things don't work. And then we get into maybe like this spiral and shame of like, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible mom because this worked for everybody else. Why
Yep.
doesn't it work for me? Is something the way that I did it or I approached it or I did it wrong, right? Like we internalize that as a failure on
Exactly.
our part rather than recognizing it for what it is, which is you can't strategy out of things sometimes. Like it's maybe more of a fit than a strategy. So
Yeah, for sure.
one of the things that you talk about is the difference between strategies and also nurturing the parent. So, why is that distinction so important?
One of the biggest things that you said is the shame. When you try something that usually should work, or when I say should, I use that very loosely. And now I don't even say should like based on what everybody else is doing or the Pinterest scroll that you had or the TikTok reel or Instagram reel that you're looking at, like, oh, this is working for everyone else. First of all, let me just say this. People are only giving you a crop of their life. Like just when people look at social media, I just want them to think like, how many takes did it take you to even get that picture of everyone looking good and your hair still out of place? Nobody else is living a life different than that. Nobody. I don't care what anybody says. That perfect picture that you got in that perfect video, it took about 200 to 3,000 shots to get that. And so just normalize that for yourself for a moment. Um, so when I say should, I'm talking about like even the should that worked yesterday for you. Because while you're out here just trying to do the best that you can as a parent, and just when you thought, oh, I got all those things together and that worked yesterday. So today I'm going to use those same strategies. Guess what? Your child's a person and they're thinking, oh, that worked yesterday. So today I'm going to use those same strategies. And oftentimes your strategies are misaligned. And so just when you thought it was working, that's just when they thought it wasn't. And so now you're back to square one. And so to your question, it's the shame. It's the understanding that there's no perfect parenting. So I often push there's present parenting. And so when you are trying to think about what happened before, or you're setting up your chart and I'm not saying you shouldn't have them because I do too, because those things help. But when you're setting up your lesson plan for the day for your child, you need to have some gray area. You need to have some room. You need to have some understanding that this is a new day. Life is different today. And so the plan that you used perfectly for yesterday may not be the plan for today. It may have to shift and shake a little bit. And don't get yourself caught into that, because that means you're striving for perfection and you're going to have a result of shame. But if you strive for presence, then your results look a little bit different, because then if you say, okay, when we did this, that worked, but now it's not working. What am I seeing? What am I not only seeing with my eyes, what am I seeing with my ears from my child that it can shift? And you may see, hear something and try to approach that, and that fails too. Don't get yourself caught up in shame, because we're people. And I often I tell my daughter this, and I want to say this to any mom that's listening, like, when my daughter gets upset about something or she's asking me a question, I have to say to her, like, I'm no perfect than you. Like, if you're going to, and I'm going to use my young people terminology because that keeps me young. If you're going to crash out for it, then guess what? There's probably 199% chance that I am going to too. So think about, if this will bother you, it probably will bother me too. So don't think that I'm any more perfect than you. And so that's what I want moms to hear, and other parents to hear that same thing. Like, if it's going to bother someone else, don't get caught up in the shame that it bothers you too. It should. Like, this is hard work, raising children, not only just raising neurodivergent children. It is hard work, because all of the degrees that we have as educators, or if you are in a different field for your profession, you went to school for it, you've gotten some testing for it, you've gotten some training for it. But even with that, the job didn't become real until you got in the field. Parenting, we don't get any precursors. The job is real immediately. Like, it's just immediately, and we get nothing else. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, yes. And my wheels are already spinning too, of like a bunch of other questions that I want to ask, because I think that you put it perfectly. Like, you can read all of the parenting books, and when you go to apply it to your own family life, like it doesn't always work out the way that we would hope or we would anticipate, right? And so then there's that cycle of shame, because we were hoping that something would have this outcome and then it doesn't, and then we fall short, or we feel like we fall short, right? But it really is much more about like this collaboration and like this openness with the child of like, hey, I know that this is where you want to go. This is where I want to help you go. How can we get there together? Versus maybe like this kind of butting heads. Um, and I think too, one of the things that you had mentioned was, it's different from day to day. So strategies or tools that you used yesterday may not work today. And I'm thinking too about developmental stages, right? Like things that work when they're, 2 and 3 don't work when they're 7 and 8. And so you're constantly having to change and evolve your parenting style and your approaches just based on sheer developmental needs and differences among all. I have a spread from 4 months to 9 years in my household right now. So we're like at every single possible little micro
Yeah,
step.
yeah,
There are those shifts, and like especially like adolescence or young adult, like that is very different than having a school age child that's, 10 years old. So how does supporting the parent emotionally, as you mentioned, lead to better support for the child overall?
yeah. I'm gonna touch on that point, but I want to go back to something that you said too. Um, going back a little bit to what were some of the misconceptions, because it'll lead into the question that you just asked. Understanding that when you have a neurodivergent child, typically they are emotionally underdeveloped. And so you typically would think, when you say like you're 10, you should, there's that should again, know better. Well, first of all, even if they're not neurodivergent, they're not 10 until they turn 11 because it took a year for them. So they're like, you should know. It's like, I just mastered how to be 10 and now you tell me I'm 11, you know? So that's one thing. But also when it comes to neurodivergent, because they're brains are underdeveloped in a way that their emotional intelligence is not at where it is. I don't want to say should, but where it is documented to be at their age. It's just not there because they're dealing with some deficiencies in their brain for that. And so that's why you have the meltdowns and all of those things. And then you're thinking like, well, you just had this meltdown yesterday for the same thing. Why didn't you learn it? They're not conditioned to learn it from an experience. That's just not how their brain operates. And so going to your point about building up women or moms emotionally for that, one thing is educating. That's the one thing that I do pull on from my experience as being an educator and also my studies in psychology is once you educate someone to get a better understanding of how things work biologically, how things work physiologically, then you can probably have a little better understanding of how you need to operate because okay, this is not a tag on me and my parenting. This is not an attack to me. This is not defiance. This is what my child just cannot experience. It would just be the same thing. Like if your child is physically disabled and they don't have operation of one of their legs, you tell them to come on and they say I can't, you're not going to get mad at them and yell at them and discipline them because they're not moving along as fast as your other children with two legs. So just because you can't see the deficiency or the disability, if you will, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And then to your point, I want to share a funny story about the shifts and the changing. So I wrote a book, which is right there, which is called Empower Her to Thrive. And it is a devotional for moms raising neurodivergent children. But the devotional is packed with some stories of real life situations, but then it also lends itself into how I learned who I was based on those situations. But one of the stories that I put in there that really speaks to this is my daughter and I went to the playground in our neighborhood. And at the time, she was maybe 9 or 8.5. And she might have been 8. She was 8. And she got into the swing, and I wasn't feeling well. So it was like I was having like allergies, all the things. And so I was just like there, but I was not there. And she got into the swing that's for a toddler, the kind you put your legs in. And she got in there, and I'm sitting on the bench, not too far from the playground. And I hear, Mom, I'm stuck. And I'm like, stuck where? Like, and I just look up and she's in this swing. Livid was not the word. Like, I was beyond livid because I don't feel well. I immediately start spiraling that we're going to have to call the fire department. They're going to have to cut her out of this thing. Like, I'm all over the place. So I go over there. I'm trying to figure it out. Luckily, there was another family there with the dad. He's trying to help me. We put it upside down. All the things. She gets out the swing. I am all of the words. Like, I am not
Oh my
I
goodness.
am angry like Peter in the Bible when all the stuff. I got all those words coming out, right? And so I'm so angry, all the things. Fast forward to probably like 2 or 3 weeks later, I feel better. We're at the same park and I hear I'm stuck. And I said, where? The same swing.
Oh my goodness.
This time I had a little bit more strategy to get her out and figure it out. I'm still a little bit angry, but I'm not as angry because I was not feeling well. But I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you get right back in the same swing when you know exactly what happened the first time? All of the things, like I'm reprimanding her for all of the things that you shouldn't have done that. You knew it didn't work the first time, all the things. It wasn't until the next day that I sat in it and I was journaling in my morning time and it dawned on me. And I said, first of all, I should not have reprimanded her for that swing. I should have celebrated her for trying something again. Because then I started thinking about how she may have thought about this. She possibly have thought that it wasn't I should have taught her that it was the design of the swing that did not allow her to get in it, but she possibly thought that it was something that she did wrong, that she was going to try it again to do it differently. So if I do it again, I'm going to have a little bit more strategy to do it differently and it will work this time. And it didn't. And so my approach should have been, that's really brave of you to try that again. Let's talk about why this didn't work. My first approach should have been, you can't get in that swing because it's not designed for you. And we probably could have mitigated the situation altogether. But I think that it happened again because it gave me, like I said, she shows me who I am. It gave me what my approach should be when someone makes a mistake a second time, on the level of empathy and grace that I should have for her, and explaining to her, like, this is why it didn't work, but let me celebrate you in trying it again and not reprimand you for trying a thing. And so that is some of the types of things that I help moms to reflect in those moments of, let's step out of ourselves for a second, let's remove our ego, and let's think about being present with our child. And so I just thought that that was a perfect story to kind of answer the question that you just.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like I was along those same sort of like wavelengths of, oh my gosh, why would you try again? Right? Like, we know it didn't work the first time. Why would you try again? But really, what we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage our kids to try again and equip them with more tools to be more successful the next time. And so even like the limitations, right? Like, as you mentioned too, like if there's a physical, sort of disability, then we can clearly see this may not work, right? But mentally, that's something that's hidden.
Yeah.
So I mean, it does make sense, and it opens my eyes too in this conversation of like, oh, my second son has ADHD, and like the creativity and the flexibility of thought far surpasses what I'm capable of.
Right.
I'm like, I actually need to do some reflection myself, because
Yeah.
it's more of like the creative sort of, I'm gonna solve this problem versus sort of like active defiance or that. So oh my goodness, I love this conversation.
Think about, like, when she was younger, before I knew, I kind of always knew, but I was like, nah, I don't think so. Because I really didn't believe in it. To be honest, she would sit on the top of my couch. And I just was like, maybe this is a six-seater. I don't know. It's probably a six-seater, and we just use it for a three-seater. She would get on the table and jump off, and I'd say, stop doing that. And she goes, why? And I go, because you can hurt yourself. And her actual answer at the age of 3, well, I didn't hurt myself. And she was asking me, like, if that's the reason and I didn't hurt myself, then you must have another reason, because if I'm not hurting myself, then your reason is false. And so I'm going to keep doing it. And that's not defiance. That's like, what you're telling me doesn't match what's actually happening. So until you tell me there's another reason, and it proves to be true, then I'm not doing it. So then my answer is like, because I probably will hurt you. So I just need you to get down.
It's like the fear of what could come, right? And like,
They don't have gray. There's no gray area for them.
right. Your reality is like, this didn't happen, so I'm going to try it again, or I need to solve this problem, or I really want to use this, or I want to do this. How can I get to that goal, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to try different things to get there.
Yeah.
Which is honestly, like, I think it's like a superpower, honestly. Like, I'm so impressed with the connections that my son makes between things, and I'm like, I never even thought about
I
that.
would have never thought of that.
For sure. Well, you have experience both as an educator and as a parent. So I want to talk a little bit about like that dynamic with school and how parents, families can better work together with the school to help support their neurodivergent kids. Do you have any tips or I know that you're a big supporter of advocacy too for your child. So talk us through a little bit about how we can better navigate that school relationship.
Yeah, I think that the buzzword that has been thrown around so much, for parents, which makes them afraid to advocate, is the helicopter parent. We
Mm.
really need to kind of eradicate that term, or really define what that term is, because it's thrown around so much. And so parents are fearful of speaking up because they're going to be looked like the helicopter parent. But also, I don't think educators really know what a helicopter parent is. They will label or term someone that is involved and has questions and wants to advocate as a helicopter parent, when there just needs to be a conversation that we both have the same goal. My goal is for my child to be successful, and your goal is for my child to be successful, because if my child doesn't look good, you don't look good. Just being really honest. I would say that when I was a teacher in the classroom, I would say, My job is for you to look good because if you look good, I look good, and I'm not in the business of looking bad. You got me? So this is what we're doing. And that should also be the educator's standpoint when it comes to working with the child and communicating. I think if there was more communication across the board with from schools to families and present, not perfect and not policy, it's present education, present communication, then you would have a little bit more comfortability and parents being able to come to you and explain as well as you explaining to them. And then also realizing as educators, we really get stuck in ourselves and like they should know better. Like, should they? Because what you're communicating is something you've learned in school or something that you've learned through educating. These don't think because again, when we became parents, we did not all of a sudden get downloaded 4 years of a bachelor's degree or 2 more years of a master's degree in education. And so, just like when we go to the doctors and we say, Doc, my arm is hurting, he says, let me check your toe. You don't say, I said my arm, not my toe. Why are you over there? You just trust the process and say, okay, he clearly knows what he's doing because he went to school. And so, the same thing when it comes to info, like for a parent to say, okay, let me trust the system of teachers, but only way that I'm going to trust is that I know that you hear me. And so, because we're dealing with, precious commodities here, these are our children that we also love and we want the best for after the year or 185 days that they're going to be in your classroom. You want the best for them then. I want the best for them for life. And so teachers also have to hear that their parent is just coming in. And so you may have to do a little bit of educating to the parent on what your systems are and how you are moving towards that success. Because sometimes what it looks like too, it looks like, why are you checking my child's toe when I talked about my child's this? And if they understood the why behind the process, then they would say, okay, I see why you're doing 1 plus 1 when my child actually is having trouble with 2 times 4. I see what the system is and why that's in place, but you just automatically assume that everyone knows, and we all know what assuming does. And so just having a better line of communication between the two, and I would say with that, because I know we're busy as educators. I've been in the classroom for years before. And so I know, like, when you say communicate more, and I got to teach these kids, I got to email, I got to do all these things. It starts from day one. One of the things that I was successful with is I communicated. I had a system where I communicated newsletters and details and just gave parents insight. So they felt comfortable enough to ask questions when they didn't know, but they also felt comfortable enough that if I had to come to them with a problem, then they knew that it was true because they saw how much I cared and poured in. And so if you got into education and you don't think it is a communication business, you need to get out of education, because in addition to teaching those children that you are in front of, it also means that you have to do some teaching to the parents. And what that looks like is building relationships. And what that looks like is communication. And then on the parent side, when we think of that, being able to trust that the teachers have the best interest, but also trust your instinct. You were given that child to raise. By chance, they got on the roster of the teacher. And I say by chance, there's some divineness in there too. But you were specifically given that child. And so if you have an instinct that something's not right, the heck with helicopter feeling parenting. You speak up about it. You ask the questions that you need to ask. You reach out to an organization or individuals like myself to say, hey, I want to say this. I want to know this. Can you help me formulate what that kind of looks like? And being able to communicate that. And then I say to school leaders, invest in building people, whether that's building the people of your parents, those are stakeholders, whether that's building the people of your students so they can become better communicators. I was a high school principal, and so my first stakeholders were the students, not the parents, and your staff, because we can automatically assume that everyone has emotional intelligence. Everyone thinks they do until they don't. And so investing in them to do the work and in yourself to do the work to understand how to show up with presence, how to hear, not just with your ears, but with your eyes.
So I think so practical too, right? And powerful, like the ability to advocate, ask the question, right? Just ask the question. If you have a concern, ask the question. That's why you go to the doctor. You're like, hey, this is abnormal, or this isn't like them normally. Can you help me? Right? Like the same,
Right.
call on your teacher, call on the educators, open up those communication channels. And I do agree with your point too of like this. it does feel overwhelming though sometimes. And so
Yeah.
being able to navigate that, prioritize, even from teachers, they have 30 kids or
Yeah.
more at the
No
secondary
more.
level, that they're wanting to pour into. And so oftentimes, unless you get that phone call, I'm a former teacher myself, if you get that phone call, it's like, yes, I need to take a moment. I need to make sure that, we're moving in the right direction for this child. And by no means is it no communication mean that they don't care. It's just
Right.
they have other things going on too. So sometimes all it takes is that phone call or that text and be like, hey, how is so and so doing? To be like, okay, I need to pause and reflect.
I stamp on that too. Like some things that I do for my teachers that have my daughter is I make sure that because it's a co-parenting situation. If something's going on at home that I know is going to affect, let's not just mistake for a moment as parents that if something happened at home, the kid doesn't stop and thinking about it when they get on the bus or get out the car at the car rider line and they move on. It it's going to show up some way somehow at school, regardless if you think it's small or little, even if it's a little spat that's going on with the kids in the neighborhood, you're like, that's nothing. That's going to show up. And so my school uses Parent Square and we communicate. And so I may just send a little note. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm just asking you to be aware. So if you see my child has a little dispute with so and so kid, oh well, they probably live in the same neighborhood, or to talk her out. Or if I tell you that my daughter went to bed on time last night, but she was very restless and she got up a couple other times, just making you aware. Now they know that if she's falling asleep during gym or she's taking extra long time in the bathroom, they're just a little bit aware of that. Oh wait, she did have a little bit of a rough day. It's okay to communicate those types of things because it's just like sending your kid over to a friend's house to spend a night, or if you're co-parenting with the other parent, letting them know what's going on. Like they get there and they're like, my mom always lets me have suckers for dinner. Wait a minute.
Isn't adding up. Oh my God.
And if you're not talking, you may believe them. Like, well, your mom's doing a pretty good job. She probably does let you have a sucker. Hey, 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 hey.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. And like I chatted with another connection the other day and we were talking about like this dysregulation too that can happen. So like if you're getting into an argument in the car and they close the door and they walk into school, then what does that mean for their walk from the door of the car to the classroom door? Are they getting in fights? Are they like or saying something rude, or are they retreating to the bathroom because they need a time, like some quiet time before they go into like this hustle and bustle of a classroom with other kids. So even just I think that's also a reflection on us too, right, as parents, is how can we be most present and help set them up for success in those transition moments of they're leaving our care or they're going to visit with grandma and grandpa or whoever it is, that our kind of tonality and our interactions, communication truly influence where their headspace might.
So important. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up, there's a couple more questions that I have, but what advice would you give to parents listening in today that might be feeling overwhelmed or exhausted or feeling like they're maybe failing, um, failing
Yeah.
in quotes, I should say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that is a great question because whenever you do something like as parenting, you want to do it well. But I think the best advice would be just like in the classroom, you have to shift your standards. You have to understand, um, label what success is, and then shift your standards for that. If you're saying success should be you look like that TikTok parent you saw, then hey, you're gonna fail. But if you say success is me showing up for my child, then you assess what your success was for that day. Did you show up for your child? And if you did, then that is a win. Today, I label success as my daughter. She usually suffers from um, ADHD paralysis, where all of the choices are there and she can't make one. And it seems so easy to me, like just pick an outfit, let's go. And it often happens in the morning after she's had a long night and she can't regulate. And the win for me today was she came to my room and she said, into my bathroom, and she said, Mom, I don't mean to be difficult. So she recognized that there's a challenge there, and she said, "But I think I'm having a little bit of hard time picking out my outfit today." I could honor that. I'm not get your clothes. No, I said I get it. Okay, how about you do this? Can you do your hair? Like, what's the thing you can do? And she said, "Yes, I will do your hair, and then we'll focus on your clothes." So I knew our goal was all of these tasks we had to do to get out the door. But if I say to her, we got to do this and we got to do that, that's just going to make it worse. She did her hair. And then afterwards, I was waiting patiently, no stress. And she came and she said, I'm going to try to pick my clothes out. And then if I need help, I'll let you know. That is a total win for me. And that's a total win for her. And she picked her clothes out. She didn't need my help. We got out the door with ease. And so to that point is identifying what your true wins are in presence. Don't identify what a win is based on what society tells you should be for your family, what your social media tells you should be for your family, even what your other family members tell you what should be for your family. Identify what it looks like for your family, your individual children, your entire family, what that looks like, and then assess your success based on what it is built for your family.
Love that. That kind of like goalpost that everyone is working towards together. And that's different than what your neighbor may be or someone you see scrolling on your Instagram feed or however it may be, right? So that aligns.
Because some people will even say things like, your daughter picked out her clothes, like, whoopie do. Oh, no, this is why it is important for us because last week we had mental breakdowns at least 4 times because of this. So, no, this is a win. This is a big win. And I need to put just as much energy as I put into her celebrating her birthday. I need to put just as much energy into that because that was big for her. Yeah.
And it is like in those daily moments too, right? Like the compounding effect of, oh, I'm going to celebrate this win with her. She recognizes that this is important. And then that fuels her like independence, right? And her confidence in herself of, oh, I can do this. My mom believes in me. And, we've gone through this together and we're working on we're in the same lane. um, so, as we wrap up at Launch Family, we've created a parenting guide called Emmy. So you can think of her as kind of like your support system for navigating modern family life. And so sometimes our moms can ask her anything from emotional challenges to school routines. So before we go, I want to share just one question that a mom actually sent in since
Awesome. I love that.
we've been in the trenches together. So relevant for our conversation today too. So her question was, my family doesn't understand ADHD, so how can I help them see that it's not just bad behavior? Any practical ways to educate or open up dialogue with extended family?
That's really good. Without sounding promoty or salesy, that's one of my biggest missions is being that voice for those parents because when you're in it and you hear other people, people start to judge you and not even judge in a bad way. They start to have um uh what is the word I'm looking for? Perceptions of you, not just based on what you're saying, but based on who they know you to be or have been. And so they are just they're not looking at your words that are coming out your mouth right now. They're looking at how your child was behaving yesterday and last year and how you showed up for that and how you did this. And so everything you're saying when it comes to ADHD, honestly, it's like, well, you're just making an excuse. Oh, you're one of those gentle parents, or oh, all of the things. And so being able to provide the resources to your family and not a book and not a like read this, look, see it, because then now you're trying to prove yourself and you're going to fall into the shame as well. But there's lots, well, I'm not even gonna say lots, that's a lie. I approach it with humor a lot of times. And so if you find me on social media, you'll see a lot of my humor tactics, and that because psychology is also my background. Now you remember what's funny. And then also you remember what tugs on your heart. I also not only post the humor, I post the real raw moments of what's happening in ADHD. And that's why I have the podcast. Sharing those type of resources is something that they're not going to feel like you're educating them or you're making another excuse. It's just like, hey, listen to this, or whatever. And when they do, it's like, oh my God, I never knew. I posted something recently about a struggle and a stress that I was having during a meltdown. And although this person has been following me for years, they called me and they're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "You posted something." I'm like, "Oh, I forgot I posted that like 2 days ago because life is okay today, right? It might not be in 5 minutes." Um, but then after telling them like, yeah, they're like, "Oh my God, I never thought." They went and they started studying on their own, and then they called me back and said, "I did not know how real this was." And so the practical things would be tap into the emotional aspect, if you will. And those emotional aspects usually are humor or a heart tug. And you have to assess what type of people, your family that you're dealing with. If they're the person that gravitates more towards humor, share some of those things. And then they're going to be looking like when they see it too, because it's so real. when they see someone like me or another social media influencer post something, they're gonna think, "Oh, that is Joanna," or "Oh my God," whatever your kid name's like, and then they'll say like, "Hey, I saw this thing," because they'll start to get more people. I saw this thing. You should look at it. And you'll see how much they'll try to share with you about things, and then that can open some dialogue of conversation. Like, yeah, that's exactly what I experienced. Do you want to babysit?
Oh, I love that approach too, because I think, family events in general can be a little bit stressful just to try to navigate like the social pieces. And then when you have a child that has neurodivergence or, other things going on, it's like it might feel like a microscope, right? Of like, oh, everyone's watching my kid, or they assume that it's going to be my kid that's going to go like knock the cup off the counter or something, or run through the house or whatever it may be. But at the same time, like approaching it through those kind of heartstrings, as you mentioned, of like the humor.
Yeah,
Okay, like you got the funny uncle, great, like drop some lines to him. Encourage them to encourage the conversation, maybe. Like
yeah,
even just talking about it of like, oh yeah, she had a great week, or like building up your child in front of them. I think it's also a really big thing because if you I mean, I've noticed for my son, like if we're talking about like some of his weaknesses, that's vulnerable for them and they don't want that.
yeah,
So, building them up in front of family, friends, I think is also one of those things that can really enhance your relationship with your child as well in those
yeah.
contexts.
Definitely. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your powerful story, your personal experience through that, your deep wisdom and the beautiful honesty with us today. Your
Of
work
course.
reminds us that raising neurodivergent kids isn't about fixing them. It's about understanding, nurturing, and building that lasting connection. To listeners, if you found today's conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and check out Tawana's podcast, Tawana Talks, and her coaching programs. We'll include all of the ways to connect with Tawana in the show notes. Until next time, remember, your child's success starts with you, feeling seen, supported, and strong. You're not alone, and we're cheering you on every step of the way.